let's start this on time tonight. I'm going to open up the planning board meeting at 7 p.m. First thing I need to do is read an announcement. This meeting of the planning board is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, pursuant to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have suspended public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. We are meeting remotely and broadcasting live on Spencer Cable Access to ensure public viewing access. First order of business for this first item on the agenda is the discussion regarding board policies and procedures. And unless you have any objections, Jeff, I'm handing it off to you.
All right. Thank you very much. So thanks everybody for being on the meeting here. And I was just noting in my head here that in my 3 years on the board, this is the first agenda I've seen without a solar public hearing on it. So that's kind of refreshing, I have to say, just for a change. It's the board policies and procedures. We've had 2 meetings already, one in January, one in February. We went through agendas, and we went through the structure of the board. I haven't put anything in writing yet. I'll get there at some point. The other thing I want to mention is that there are some pretty big topics to get to that we've talked about, such as built and decommissioning bonds, things like that. We're not quite there yet, but we'll get into those topics later on in the year. For now, though, I just want to go back to the conversation about the structure of the board. There was one important topic that I left out last month, which is the possibility of having an associate member on the board, essentially having a 6th member who either doesn't vote or has limited voting rights. It would give us another voice in all our deliberations. There's nothing in our rules and procedures that I could see about associate member. Maybe I'm missing it, but top of page 2, it talks about that we should consist of 5 members. Doesn't say anything about an associate member. But regardless of that, my question for you is, do you think it makes sense to try to get a 6th member, to try to find a volunteer, just in general? But then taking a step back, I'm not exactly sure how we do that, what the rules are for that. I assume we'd have to advertise for it. I don't know. So I'm putting the concept out there of an associate member, and I just want to hear a little feedback from the board and from Todd or anyone else that's on the board.
This is Bob. We did at one point have it called an alternate member. I think we've had tried to do that in the past, where we actually had maybe at one time an alternate member. Problem is trying to find people to serve on the board in general.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, getting volunteers, absolutely. Sorry, Bob, I cut you off. Continue.
No, I'm done.
Oh, okay. All right. So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that was actually how I got my start on the planning board. Is I was an alternate member.
Okay, you were the one. All right, John. I know there's someone who did it.
And Jeff, if I could interject for a moment.
Yeah, sure.
Much like John, I after I finished my undergraduate, I spent a year on the Barry Planning Board as an associate member. For that kind of edit, it would require a general bylaw adjustment to make room for that, to kind of carve out the position, and it would require going before annual town meeting or special town meeting to implement that sort of edit.
Okay. I didn't realize we don't have that.
But you sure we don't have something already? Because we had Johnson, like you said, as an alternate.
Yes, I was referring to if you wanted to kind of carve out and formalize an associate position rather than just an alternate.
Well, I mean, what's the difference?
Well, in title, alternate members typically serve in lieu of, in case if someone is sick or cannot make it. There is a bit of overlap with the associate position. However, the associate member can vote on special permits, regardless if there is a member missing or not. it would be whether if a member was missing and they needed an extra vote for an A&R, for example, the alternate could vote in case of a missing member, whereas the associate could not. Associates are limited in their parameters to only be able to vote on special permits.
Wait a second, so an associate can vote on special permits, but an alternate cannot, or the opposite?
Can only if there's a member missing.
Associates.
Yes, associates. Yes, associate can vote on a special permit. However, an alternate can only if someone is missing. Sorry, it's unclear.
So I just wanted to be clear about that. So actually, you know, that when I started speaking here, I said that, you know, such a member would have no or limited voting rights. That's kind of what I was alluding to. I was actually an associate member of the Town of Millis Planning Board in the 90s when I started with town work. So I could relate also. All right. So the question before us here is, do we stay with the alternate member concept that we've had in the past, which I was unaware of? Or do we pursue an associate member, which sounds pretty complicated, especially at a town meeting? Hello? Hear a lot of noise. Hello? Hello?
There we go.
We can hear you.
Sorry.
Background noise.
It's tough on the cell phone.
Yeah, I absolutely, you know, I think it's an important position, and you know, I know from what I recall, it was you know, I was there to participate in discussions and you know, as part of the meeting, but then at the end of the day, I would only have a vote if one of the normal members was absent and it was a vote regarding a special permit. So I'm in the process of
it's actually getting me
around on my computer trying to find the bylaw.
I'm actually got me a little confused again, because you said you were called an alternative member, and Tarja said it was the associate member that would get to vote.
Well, an alternate member, I'm sorry to interrupt, an alternate member can vote on a special permit if an existing member is absent. They basically fill in that same shoe. However, an associate member can vote on special permits regardless.
Okay, now I understand. Okay, so that makes more sense. So would that mean with an associate member, we'd always have 6 people voting? Is that what you're saying?
Typically, the associate member abstains if there's an even number, typically as a matter of not tradition, but as kind of general practice. Because once a quorum is voting one way or the other, it's largely immaterial, but that's something to consider.
All right, well, this has been extremely helpful. Thank you. So, I mean, to me, it makes sense to stay with what we have. Just stay with the alternative member, alternate member. But at the same time, we should publicize that we're looking for somebody and see if we can get someone. That seems like the easiest track.
It is notoriously difficult to recruit for town boards and commissions. This is true.
Yeah. So, I mean, regardless of whether it's an associate or an alternate, either way, it's going to be hard to find someone. But the point is how we frame it. If we do, you know, put it on the web page or something that we're looking for someone. Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? John, you looking for a document?
Yeah, I know I have it. It's not far. I'm just trying to figure out which folder I stuffed it in my planning board folder on my computer.
We could pick this up in our April meeting and reach a conclusion then, if instead of going nuts now trying to find something.
I'm going to go nuts now that I'm looking for it to begin with.
Well, I think what we're shooting at here is we already have some basis for having an alternate member, and we should somehow advertise that we're looking for someone. I think that's kind of what we've gotten to.
I think that's a fair consensus, and barring opposition from, I guess, Paul and Maria.
No, I'm fine.
All right, so Todd, what do you suggest we do? Thank you. So Todd, what do you suggest we do at this point to get it out there that we'd like someone?
I would make an advertisement, ideally upon the town website. I would also highlight the fact that as of right now, meetings are held remotely. So it's not as if we're asking that much time out of the house from folks. So if people have any safety concerns, we can help allay those by reminding them this is, as of right now, only only an online meeting. Aside from that, we can advertise as you just described on the website. Provided there is basis for an alternate in bylaw, which of course there is, we can just simply advertise as normal for filling that position. No harm, no foul.
That sounds good. Everyone else good with that? The rest of the board good with that?
I do.
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds great.
All right, terrific. That's some progress. All right, so let's see. We've been going for about almost 10 minutes. I'm going to jump into a new topic with you guys, which is site visits. Something we've discussed a lot on the board, but have no real procedures for, as far as I could tell. I'm not looking to create procedures, really. What I'm looking to do here, well, maybe I am. It depends. Really, there's a couple of things going on. First of all, there's the concept of actually scheduling site visits is kind of the one prong of site visits, and the other up to check things out. So the first thing I want to get into a little bit is scheduled site visits. So, for me, I've been reflecting on this a lot the last couple of months. And since my time on the board, the only site visit that we've done is 22 Norcross. 22 Norcross, because even though I know they're having some issues with moving forward with their project for various reasons, I've always felt extremely comfortable talking about that project because just seeing the property has such profound benefits because you could kind of see the property in your head when you're sitting at a meeting like this. I think it's important for our board to do site visits. Now, I recognize that everyone has jobs and, it's cold and snowy in the winter, and it's hard to find time to do these. But I, really believe, not going backwards, because there's a lot of them going backwards, but going forwards, that all new projects that we receive that are going through site plan review, that we should be scheduling a site visit. And we have to do those formally because obviously if we have 3 members or more, it's, it has to be a posted meeting. I wouldn't expect all 5 members to be at every site visit. If we get 3 out there, that's great. But I think it's important to have that opportunity to see the properties. And in terms of going in the other direction, we have a lot of solar projects out there, and we haven't actually seen the property. There are 1 or 2 in mind that I would really like to see, which we could get into in a little bit. So, having said all that, I'm wondering how everyone feels about, again, I realize it's time, it's an hour or 2 out of your Saturday. Also, the benefit of summer is that we could do them at 6 o'clock at night. So that gives us more time. We could have a site visit season from, April to October or whatever you want to call it. So I'd like to hear from the rest of the board and from Todd about this topic, what you have to say.
Jeff, if I may?
Yep, sure. Okay.
I would certainly support as many site visits as we can feasibly execute. Of course, for any site visits that's planned, of course, I will be there and present in my Sunday best to attend. Just make sure that it will, any gathering more than 2 would have to be posted and announced, just to make sure that everything is compliant with open meeting law. So
yes,
that it must be posted and we have to go through the standard procedure. But that said, the more site visits we can execute, the better. However, we want to make sure we can reliably fulfill these site visits. I don't want any applicant to feel that because their particular application was visited by the board on site and only a couple other that year have been visited by. I don't want them to feel persecuted in any way or treated differently. So if we're going to go that route, and which I support, we should just make sure that it's evenly applied across all.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I understand what you're saying, Todd, but my concern there is not all projects are the same. And it's entirely possible that a project will come across that the board doesn't feel we have to visit.
This is true.
And, also this kind of going in the other direction, I'll be honest with you, looking at all the projects that we currently have in open hearing stage, if I had to pick one, it would be Ash Street. I mean, I really want to see that property. If I had to pick one, of the ones we already have. So
and I'm not looking to be contrary for the sake of contrary. I just want to make sure that the full gamut of options is known.
I completely appreciate that, because we can't show favoritism or the reverse of favoritism to some projects. But I think you and I are in agreement that we should have a formal process for visiting. Again, not going backwards, although I did mention Ash Street, but going forwards, because we're going to get new projects, obviously, in the years ahead. And we should be seeing them. Now, of course, the issue is if someone comes in December and, the hearing's only going to go a couple of months and we have a foot of snow out there, it's a little tough to see, the increases. So we need to work around that, that kind of thing. So, I mean, any board members? There's a lot of noise in the background. Any board members have thoughts on this topic you'd like to share?
I mean, you're certainly not going to get any opposition from me in this regard. I could, best application of this almost I could see as like an introduction to a project somewhere maybe right after the first hearing is held, and near when it's just beginning, so to speak, so it kind of gives us all a lay of the project, if you will, and I could see that being very productive. Is just allowing the applicant even to kind of give them an opportunity for them to, I don't know if I want to use the term sell the project, but it's to give them an opportunity just to have us on site and maybe illustrate to the board aspects of the project that may not be fully appreciated sitting in a boardroom looking at a set of plans. So I'm absolutely in favor of that. I'm just gonna also stand back to a degree and acknowledge the logistics and setting that up and executing it and everything along with that. I think that it's something we should do, and I don't want to. I guess I want to allow board members to feel as if they have they shouldn't feel, I guess, obligated. If that's the right way to put it, that kind of like you had noted, Jeff, is that it's likely we're not going to get the entire board that'll show up for these, and that's okay. That it's we all have our own pursuits and responsibilities, and it's not going to work out every time. And there's also nothing in prohibiting members from going themselves when they're able, but it's just as a kind of a starting point, if you will, right? When we get a project, I think it'd be beneficial to everybody to try to arrange a formal gathering of the board with as many people as can be there, and just on one hand, so the board can see it and appreciate it, and it very well could benefit the applicants for these projects to a large degree as well by allowing them to better convey their thoughts, their visions, if you will. That's kind of where I'm standing on that.
All right, thanks, John. And I was, like I said earlier, I realize everyone's busy, and I wouldn't expect all 5 members at every one of these. But so I want to echo that. But what I, what I really want to echo is when we were at 22 Norcross that day a couple years ago. It was a cold day, if I remember. We walked sort of up the property and around the back of it, behind the tree line. We kind of stood there behind the tree line. We kind of came, and we talked a lot about the house, which is a big deal with that project. We stood there staring at the house. So, I mean, I'm not going to go on and on. Obviously, you guys know the benefit of site visits. So, as the vice chair, as I alluded to back in February, I'm willing to take on the responsibility of working with Todd and Monica to plan these site visits going forward. And that's kind of where we're at. So we could, when the first one shows up, we'll talk about it a little more then, getting the process rolling. So, I mean, if none of the other board members have any other comments, we could move on to a related topic with site visit. All right, cool. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about, and John just mentioned this actually, the non-scheduled site visits. Now, first of all, obviously 3 of us should not go with not scheduled because that's a public meeting violation. But for one of us to show up at a project to check things out, we've had some controversy among board members in the past regarding that. I personally think it's fine for board members to go check out any project. I think we have the right to do that. At the same time, I think it's just important to notify the board both before and after for a few reasons, just to have the communication lines open. But also, if I heard one of you was going to check out a project, I might join you because we can have 2 without it being, a published meeting. So it's just good to keep the lines of communication open and, and what's going on with these sort of off the cuff site visits. I mean, I've done it out driving around. I'll pull up in front of one of the projects and just check things out, So I'll just leave that there. If anyone has any thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them. Well, I guess no comment is good. I assume you guys are still there. Silent now. All right.
And again.
So I'm just making sure we're all on the same page. So if no one's commenting, that means we're all on the same page. So that's good. That's really good. All right. So I think we made some really good progress today with the alternate member and also with scheduling site visits. So that's 2 big ones. So I think that'll be it for me for this month. Unless anyone has anything else, or John, we could move on.
The only thing I'd touch on is as you noted, and to be it's fully transparent, if you will. A lot of it being attributed to me. I believe individual site visits. It's every member's prerogative, whether they choose to or not to, and I don't see any issue with that whatsoever. And that it's just the only thing that's worthwhile noting is that you just need to convey and also conduct yourself in a manner in which you are not or won't be perceived as reflecting the opinion of the entirety of the board, if you will. Is that, it's, if the board has made a decision, there's conditions in writing, and the permit is issued, and you're absolutely, I believe it's appropriate to reflect upon what was put into writing as a board decision. But you just have to maintain and conduct yourself in a manner where you're not making a statement that I guess the entirety of the board wouldn't be in agreement with you on, and that's the only, I guess, sticking point, if you will, the only possibility of there being controversy or conflict in all of this is you just have to make sure to take the standpoint that, hey, I'm one of 5, and it's not, like I say, personally, I'll say, I have no intent of intending to convey the will of the board, but it's, I'm speaking for myself right now, and that's about the only thing worth noting on that. I don't know if that lines up with what your thought process is or not, Jeff.
I think it does to some extent, but I think that with these, with the individual site visits, you need to be a little careful in, if you see problems, like a drainage swale is 20 feet away from where it should be or whatever, a road is a few feet over. If you see things like that, kind of standing there on the property with the plans and telling them it's wrong, it might not be the best way to go. It might be better to note all that and bring all that back to the board and back to our town planner and discuss it with us, rather than sort of doing it on the spot, at the scene. It depends on the issue.
If I could, Jeff, for just a moment.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure, Todd.
You're absolutely right. I would welcome any sort of possible violations or investigations that could possibly be of a violation. Just bear in mind, we do have Dwayne, who is our zoning enforcement officer, and he's quite good at what he does. So if you see anything that you construe as possibly being in violation of what is on the plan on paper, bring that to my attention. I'll bring Dwayne under the hood too, and then from there we'll kind of suss out what is or what isn't.
Yeah, John. So I totally hear you, John, and I think maybe where the board. Maybe where the board was in disagreement with you when we had some of those discussions was just you're presenting all of the problems right there, a lot of the problems right there. And maybe, I'm not telling you never to do that, but what I am suggesting is maybe think about some discretion in bringing some, if you see something big and sort of just letting it lie and bringing it back to us first for discussion. That's all I'm saying. I don't object to you going and having the plans out and talk to them about things. That's fine.
I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. That's that's a fair point, and well taken.
Very cool. All right, so this has been a very productive half hour. Not even if no one has anything else to comment on, we could move on the agenda. Thank you.
All right, then. Moving on, our next item is discussion on solar facility bylaws. And I know I had touched upon this earlier on. I spoke to Todd, and I believe it's what he's going to be noting further in on the town planner report rather. But I guess just maybe helpful here to preface this discussion, Todd, if you could, I guess, provide just a brief update, get us up to speed on what you noted with CMRPC earlier.
Gladly.
If you don't mind.
Absolutely. So I've been in communication with Trish Settles, the Deputy Director of CMRPC, for the past couple of months. And she's let us know that our current inventory of hours is presently at 11. That will be replenished on July 1 with the next year's allotment of hours. So we still have those 11 hours with which we can work, and we can use them and their collection of specialists in relation to energy planning and environmental planning and that kind of the green energy planning of the future. So we can go ahead and have them take a look at some of the they'll take a look at the entirety of our solar facility bylaw, at least the aspect that pertains to solar facilities for pecuniary purposes. We can share that with them. Thankfully, they have some staff that are opening up in their availability here in the next several months. And from that, we'll be able to outline some specific kind of easy to target points. And then we'll show that to those folks at CMRPC, and then they'll work their magic, do their research, and consult their experts, and they'll bring with them some possible avenues for exploration. I'm also going to connect their team with the Solar Bylaw Advisory Committee's document, their kind of final document that is a summation of their findings, their wants, and as an overall barometer for some of the more active members of Spencer at large to have their point of view and their temperament towards solar facilities in general kind of regarded and factored into account. So that way, CMRPC has a complete total 360-degree view of what it's like to live in Spencer and work alongside solar developers and some of the unexpected impacts and wrinkles that are being caused and friction that's being caused from them being around. I'll allude to that later on in the town plan report. But really, I just wanted to let the board know that we have 11 hours, which, while isn't nothing, isn't a whole heck of a lot in terms of what we have as terms of resources at our disposal. So we really need to go into this this revision process with more of a scalpel, and not to expect a complete overhaul of this bylaw to be done and ready to be completed and voted on at town meeting later on this fall. It's simply not viable. It's not viable at all. So I just want folks to keep that in mind. And as we get further involvement of different points of view, just make sure that we all know we're all on the same team. We're here to benefit Spencer as a whole and make this a better community for all of us. And as long as we can kind of check our demand for getting 100% of what we want on either side, and we realize that a good compromise usually involves both sides coming away a little bit dissatisfied, that's a very good thing. So I'm going to make this similar sort of this quick little speech to both sides as we have folks on differing sides of the issue get involved. But I think some common sense and some rationality will win the day. And as long as we can keep on task and stay focused, I think we'll have ample time to implement some revisions that'll be substantive and overall a net positive for Spencer at large. Aside from that, I'll flesh this out more on agenda item 6. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Todd. That was, great update. So the takeaway for that is correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm going to speak for all of us when I say that we've been, the issue that we've had is just a sense of being overwhelmed and just finding a good starting point. We have this information in front of us. We have a report that a lot of effort was put into, and we also are armed with all of the experiences we've dealt with going through the permitting process with all these projects. So we if anything, we have kind of almost an overabundance of material in front of us.
Yes.
And it's paralyzed us to a degree.
Yes.
And simply put, we need to get the ball rolling, and I think I feel as if I have a good way to start that off is we need to start with some of the more basic basic elements of the bylaw and come up with discuss them and come up to some kind of consensus as to which way we should head with those. And that can be forwarded to CMRPC to take into account and as they begin to this review. And I'm really of a mind that we could substantially convey our intent and our goals with coming to a definitive answer on some of just a few major points. So that said, I'd like to hit it tonight. My point of view and some standing back and again, being a willing and occasionally unwilling participant in all of this is I feel as if this can all be, or a lot of the issues that arise with these projects and the abutter concerns and everything that seems to give us difficulty, if you will, all kind of boils down to the ease at which the site is seen and heard. That people really don't care to see them for the most part, and they especially don't care to hear them. And the opposition, or I guess the issue taken with the sight of them, is just that they stand out in such I guess as so different from the settings where they're normally sited at. It's the areas where you have the most amount of land that's readily repurposed are in the more rural areas of town, where a facility like this just it does appears to stick out like a sore thumb. So I think that where I'm going with this is that the chief variable that needs to be addressed there to alleviate those concerns is setbacks. I think, I don't want to oversimplify the issue here, but I feel that a consensus on a setback, and a larger setback than what we have in place right now, is going to largely address very many of the concerns that are raised. And for as a great example, last time I looked, Spencer has the largest solar facility in Massachusetts. If not the largest, it's the second largest. And I'm referring to the at the Spencer St. Joseph's Abbey. And I bet you that there's probably a fair amount of people in town that don't even know it exists. And the people that do, I would think a very small percentage of them do not have the same concern with that facility as they may with one of the other sites, like say North Spencer Road, or what's another one, or even Home Street. And it most simply boils down to the fact that the facility at the Abbey is far removed. People don't see it. People don't hear it. And I think the way to begin to regulate this in the best way is to increase the setbacks.
To the
I've
chair.
said my piece. Yep, go ahead, take it away.
John, I do agree. And in terms of trying to hammer down a precise number here today at this discussion, I think it would be more important and more impactful to simply come to a consensus as a board that a review of the setback requirements is in order. To that extent, that allows me to then reach out to CMRPC, and between them and myself, we can find analogous towns to Spencer and see what is best planning practice, what has worked for our similar towns, and what has not worked. And from there, we can really kind of pin down a more accurate number rather than just plucking one arbitrarily. But I do agree that visibility and dimensionality are oftentimes the first friction point for folks to be discontent or malcontent with what they're seeing their town morph into over time.
Absolutely. So someone else from the board, please share your thoughts. I don't want to feel as if I guess I'm forcing my viewpoint on you guys or anything like that. It's let me know what you think.
No matter what you do. So that setbacks are fine at one point, but sometimes that's not possible. You know what I'm saying? When, like the one in Norcross goes up on a hill, you're not going to hide that no matter what you do when it gets to the top of the hill. That's one comment. The main comment I wanted to make, we have 11 hours with CMRPC, but we also should have money in the bank that we've collected over time from all these solar farms. I mean, should we put a scope of work together to CMRC and get an idea of a total hours it would take to do it and pay for some of it instead of just using hours? That's my question.
Worthwhile point. What do you think, Todd?
While that's possible, I don't think there would be enough time to have that particular study done, because I've already mentioned CMRPC staff are spread very thin. A lot of other towns are demanding of their time. So I'm really kind of we're fortunate in that we've got such a large amount of attention from CMRPC already. I don't know if the staff would be available, and even if adequate staff were available, I don't think they'd be able to conduct a viable kind of a study that would hold water and then draft language in support of that study after consensus is reached in time for the November meeting. It would be very unlikely. I'm not
sure. Not sure what you're talking about by a study. I'm saying take our bylaw suggestions that we've got from the committee and input them into a revised bylaw for us to review a final draft or several drafts. I don't think we need a study. We beat that one to death with our committee.
Well, the bylaw advisory committee, the final document that was the byproduct of that committee's work, and there was a lot of work involved. There are many provisions there that would take quite a bit of time to research the feasibility or lack thereof to implement. We would very much blow through our 11 hours very, very quickly, and it's not likely that's a viable avenue to go down. Like I mentioned, we should really go with the scalpel approach if we want to make the timeline of this fall's meeting. We really don't have. We're not blessed with the time to do something that's completely revolutionary to the bylaw. We just don't have the time nor the resources, I'm afraid.
What is the status of the moratorium getting approved? Does anyone know?
Yes, the moratorium. I can update if you like, John.
Yeah. Let's.
So the moratorium was.
Let's hit that.
Sure. The moratorium was returned to us due to some imperfections in some of the reporting language for Article 12. We have since complied with those by reposting it to the website and advertised it to their satisfaction. after the 21-day period is satisfied, I'm confident that that Maura Healy's office will approve the moratorium, and then that'll be enacted. So it's really just a matter of time.
That's good. Thank you for that update. So my comment that I have is sort of, I guess, built on what Bob was saying. I personally believe that we need to hire a consultant to do this. And I believe that for a while. I was being a little quiet because we were getting hours from CMPC and we had Todd coming on new. But my belief going back 2 to 3 months now is we need a consultant. Now, I realize that's a lot of money and a lot of time, and it's a major monkey wrench in the whole process. But I don't see any other way.
And I agree with you, Jeff. This is to do it right, so to speak. This is a product that you ultimately need to pay a professional to provide, and it's also absolutely going to acknowledge, Todd conveyed that it's getting that product is, I don't think, likely, even at this point before a fall meeting. I feel that's something we can still pursue. I think that maybe the best way to handle it is to put it in CMRPC's hands now and hit the most operative points, and get those established for town meeting this fall, and do all that under the assumption that it's part of a bigger process, which will be, continually completed for maybe next spring. Is that how do you feel about that, Todd?
That's something we could absolutely pursue, in the sense that we could task CMRPC to help us kind of shore up the most immediate sections of the bylaw that we feel are the most pressing, and then that would essentially buy us time still to pursue this kind of in a more thorough, comprehensive fashion this time next year. That would work.
Because I said it's absolutely to what you said, Jeff, and I know, and Bob as well, and you noted that there's very many issues that were touched upon in the report, and I think they all need to be addressed, but it's what we have is operable with some modifications, and I think, and I guess what Todd was alluding to as well, and in particular to what you had said, Bob, was that I don't want to, or I guess I'm afraid of, I guess, for the lack of better term or phrase, throwing too much against the wall and having none of it stick. It is, if we go for kind of a whole rewrite and we don't give it proper amount of time, I don't want, a portion of it to get thrown out, so to speak, and then have us sitting on something that leaves us in a worse position than what we were. I guess
if I could really quick, that is the severability provision is extremely important when drafting a document such as this one that's deeply technical and has quite a few moving parts, in the sense that if in the document's construction, if there are provisions that are kind of woven throughout it, if the AG strikes out one of these provisions, the entire document might collapse like a house of cards. If multiple provisions are reliant upon one shared provision, for example. So that requires a bit of finesse in the document's construction, and that finesse requires time. And time is something that we don't have much of before fall, and we don't have much of in terms of our hours with CMRPC. So it really takes a bit of threading the needle, and it requires a bit of finesse. So I would definitely recommend using a very, very sharp blade and being very precise with how we want to implement our revisions.
I personally don't think the November town meeting is that critical. And I also fully expect the moratorium to be extended. I mean, obviously we're not there yet, but I don't know why we're talking about this hard deadline of November. Why can't it be, next May? Is there anything that prevents that?
Only the deadline is November, just because that's when the current moratorium is set to expire. And so the whole intent, from the get-go was to have a new or revised bylaw in place before the moratorium expiration. That's the gist of this all, Jeff. It's but as you said, that bigger picture, I don't think we don't want to have November as our final deadline, if you will. That's kind of why I was saying what I did earlier, where I think we come up with the most operative and elements of the existing bylaw that are most subject to revision without controversy, if you will, and we have those in place for November's fall meeting and before the moratorium expires, and then we continue along with that operation, and then when we, wherever it may be, say May of next year, then that at that point we can have a more all comprehensive kind of product. Is that something you're agreeable with? Am I missing the point?
Well, are you suggesting having two formal town meeting votes on revisions, like one in November and then one next May? Is that what you're saying?
I guess essentially, do I have this? Yeah. So essentially, yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, that might be a two-step process that would work. But again, I don't know where we're getting the resources to make that happen if we don't get more outside help.
Well, and so to that end, we will be able to secure the outside help from CMRPC to complete a limited revision for this fall. And then I think the diff between, this fall and next spring, correct me if I'm wrong, Todd, but there should be enough availability in that period to and conduct the more further in-depth revision process.
In terms of staff, yes. Bear in mind, we are essentially refilled with members at the beginning of the fiscal. That's July. So that July would then run into the July of 2022. So we wouldn't get any more hours until 2022. I just want that to be kept in mind. Although doing this in a two-phased way there are certainly some advantages to it, in the sense that we can address the most pressing immediate concerns before the moratorium will expire, but we aren't guaranteed whether or not that would be renewed if it's sought. So that is something to keep in mind. We will at least be able to address the most pressing concerns before November. However, the next spring, it really depends on what the scope of work would be with that bylaw. And there's quite a bit more moving parts to that next subsequent phase. But at least phase one, we will be able to address for sure.
And
So my question to you guys is, what's the next step, or the next few steps?
Sure. If I could, John. The next step is I'm going to work with CMRPC's Energy and Environmental Planning team to really address some of the more pronounced concerns that are found within the present bylaw, and then we can literally adjust those and turn those into conversation points for future meetings. So the idea being that for the next policy meeting we can have some. I'll have some discussion topics prepared, and those can be jump-off points for the board to discuss what they would like to see and what wouldn't they like to see contained within this bylaw. I'll then take those findings and work with CMRPC behind the scenes under the hood, and then we continue that process a couple of times, and then by that endpoint, we should have a draft for November meeting that kind of addresses the key sticking out points. And from there, that should be something that we would have confidence in, shouldn't require more revision, and should be able to carry the 2/3 necessary to be able to pass a town meeting.
All right. I mean, I'm fine with all this. We just need to be clear to the town and the people who are on the committee that did all the work, that we're sort of doing this multi-step kind of process to get to the revisions. I think they're anticipating kind of an all at once, boom, kind of thing. I agree with that part of the I think the plan's done with attitude. And I would also add that we're almost at the halfway point of the year, right? The moratorium was November, so I guess a month from now we're halfway there. So the town should be also thinking about extending it. I mean, I realize we don't have it approved yet, but when that does happen, we should be talking about extending it, I believe. Whether we do that or not remains to be seen. But I'm just putting that out there. I don't want to discuss it now.
That'll be a discussion later tonight. And so to, I guess, to bite off the first chunk and to provide some initial guidance, if you will, I want to go back to setbacks and kind of, I'd like to get the board's temperature on this particular issue tonight, if possible, and that is, any additional guidance or emphasis we can provide to the CMRPC from the get-go is just going to further refine the process. So as kind of a summary, our existing setbacks are, it's whatever the underlying zoning lot is. So I believe that's at most 50 feet. And the bylaw report had to essentially recommendation of increasing the setbacks to 200 feet. With the if the facility was abutting residential use. And then I'll note that just from I guess a rough and dirty review of it, and I'm in the process of looking for it. There are a number. Here we go. So Leicester and Barry have a 100-foot setback to the fence line. No, 50 foot. Todd, can you speak to Barry?
Yeah, it's been quite some time since I was on the board as an associate member when this particular bylaw was drafted. I had a hand in it early on as providing some volunteer professional planning advice for them. That bylaw has served Barry well. However, it's worth noting that the build out it's less of an analogous comparison being Barry. It's a closer analogous comparison to one of the urban areas of Spencer, in that Barry doesn't have a Route 9 going through it, and rural residential does touch along that line. So it's not a perfect analog to compare to, but it's something certainly to draw inspiration from, for sure.
Okay. So I'm reading Leicester and Barry have a 50-foot setback to the fence line. That Sturbridge has a 100-foot setback. And then there are additional provisions to increase setbacks adjacent to residential uses, including 100-foot buffers in Boylston and Barry, and a 200-foot buffer in Sturbridge. And then it further says, Barry also requires a 200-foot buffer to the roadway. Somebody needs to go mute.
I can't discern who that's coming from, but can someone turn their mute off, please?
I think Bob's washing the dishes.
Just rinsing my hands. No, not my dishes. I just had the faucet running. That was it.
Washing my plate. I just ate a sandwich. I was washing my plate. I'm guilty one, so sorry.
Thanks for taking the blame.
All right.
So it's, there does appear to be examples, 100 feet, 200 feet. The solar bylaw report mentions 200 feet. Again, to me, my point of view is that you increase that distance, that setback, that's going to go a long way to addressing I believe, a majority of concerns. And as Bob noted earlier, it's if you, depending upon what's in that buffer and the topography of the lot, if you're going up a hill, you're going to see the stuff beyond the buffer no matter what. So it's not a perfect approach, but I think it's going to weed out a lot of the low-hanging circumstances, if you will. I guess what are the board's thoughts on setbacks? Who wants to go first?
I think we just got to do like you just did. Look at the other towns, see what works. Look at the existing ones we've had and see if a 100-foot setback makes a difference in 50. Would that have made a change in how it looks? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on what's already there for growth. I don't know. It's hard to come up with a number, sitting at a table versus looking at maybe realistically what's out there already that works or doesn't work.
If I could, I can chime into this.
Yeah.
In one of my previous positions when I worked as a regional planner for the Quabbin School District, those 5 towns, I did assemble a comparative chart of those 5 towns in relation to solar bylaws and what's required. For example, let me just zoom this out a little bit. So I can feel free to share this, but for the 5 towns, for example, Some have a minimum lot size of one of them has a 10-acre maximum. Another just has a separate appendice. One has a vegetable buffer required. One has an 80,000. There's quite a bit of variability between these 5 towns. However, each of these bylaws was accepted by the Attorney General's office. So we would be able to apply acre maximums. We would be able to apply, likely be able to apply a cap on the total number of solar facility permits permitted in town. That's something that has analogous. There are similar caps on these types of contentious permits, special permits that have been accepted by the Attorney General's office. And really, that's the first and most immediate metric for whatever revision we would like to pursue, regardless of how close it gets to each one of these revisions gets to what their ideal of perfection is. At the end of the day, it must be defensible and be able to stand on its own legs in the eyes of the AG's office. And that's something that no matter what we pursue in terms of modifications, that should be the first metric of passing muster is, will the AG accept this? Have they accepted similar provisions in similar towns before, etc.? Nothing else really tracks. We must dedicate our time effectively and make sure that there is some track record and some precedent for these types of suggested revisions. So I'll continue tearing into this chart I have assembled. I think I assembled this, 2 years ago, so things must have changed. But it does give us a good place to start. And by that, I mean CMRPC staff and myself.
And as Bob, you had a very good point there of, what if we're going to try to have some kind of objective comparison, let's take, a few of our existing projects as examples and see how they would look if we applied a 50-foot setback, 100-foot, a 200-foot, see what kind of a difference it makes, and that's actually something that I can take a look at doing myself, is taking some of the published plans and just doing an overlay or a sketch, something rough and dirty on it, and scale off a different setback, and then send that back out to the board for everybody's kind of review. I guess so. Maybe the best question I'd ask right now is any board member opposed to increasing setbacks for these projects?
No, not at all.
Nope.
All right. So that in itself is an accomplishment. It's just as far as
to the chair,
gaining our sense of direction. Yep, Todd.
Very quickly, as I'm reviewing this chart again, if you're looking for any sort of inspiration that as a bylaw that is in resonance with what the majority of the most vocal constituents have said, the town of Oakham has a solar bylaw, a commercial solar bylaw that might be of interest. It also includes a 100-foot setback or up to a 200-foot setback, depending on zoning classification. That's something that might be exploration, and if nothing else, it's worth kind of dissecting and just kind of internalizing a little bit. That might be something I would encourage to have for further research.
Okay, good to know. So I the specific number that we end up settling on is going to be, I guess, maybe a subject of further evaluation. If we can try to apply it to some of our existing projects to develop a sense. But from what I'm hearing, nobody's in opposition to the idea of increasing setbacks. That Yeah, I think it'll. I think it's a step in the right direction to try to address some of the most trying to think of the best word to use here. Some of the most controversial or attention receiving issues or complaints, if you will. And if we're talking substantial lots of land, it's really I think it's not going to be a detriment to the use of the property. And the difference between 50 feet or so that it may be now versus 150 feet, I think would make a sizable difference. I guess, and there's two other quick notes. I'd like to hit on. Do any of the board members have any, further thoughts they'd like to share regarding setbacks? All right. So the other, another one being a cap on the number of facilities. I've personally kind of, I believe it. The intent has merit. I have concerns about how well it'll stand the test of time. But I will note that it's being implemented. It's been established in the bylaws of the towns. So there's absolutely some precedent for it, and the AG has accepted it in other towns. What are the board's members' thoughts regarding putting a limit on the number of facilities? Anybody like to grab a hold of this one?
I got a question on the AG side of it. Do they limit total forever, or they limit how many permits per year?
The analogous provision that I found citations for were for, ironically enough, out of Barry. That one there was for recreational marijuana facilities, which did establish a cap that was connected to the available alcohol licenses in town. It came to a fraction, but fractions was rounded up regardless. And it ended up with being 3 indoor cultivators and 3 outdoor cultivators. I'm going to be doing more research as to see if that hard cap also extends to commercial solar installations. But as of now, that's the only instance of a hard cap implemented that has passed muster by the AG. So take that with an asterisk, but I'll be chasing further confirmation there.
So, along that note, as I'm actually going through all the crap I have saved on my computer, I do have a copy of, and I can send this to everyone. Actually, it is the letter from the AG to the town of North Brookfield, dated August 27th, 2018. And within it states North Brookfield proposed language that the total number of commercial solar facilities in North Brookfield shall be limited to 14. Facilities constructed prior to this bylaw are counted in this total. Municipal solar facilities are not counted in this total. The AG then continues to say, we approve the amendments adopted under Article 29, the one I just read to you. However, they say they further note Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 3, protects solar energy systems and buildings, etc., etc. That MGL citation being, no zoning ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit or unreasonably regulate the installation of solar energy systems or the buildings of structures that facilitate the collection of solar energy, except where necessary to protect the public health, safety, or welfare. So then they continue to say in a lot of citation and verbiage that basically there's no circumstance of that being argued in court, and that the AG usually defers to a local municipality's ability to regulate themselves and their zoning needs. But they say they approve it, and in so many words, just be aware that this might get fought at some point. But for the intent, the purposes of what we're discussing here, the AG did approve it. And I've been told, I haven't personally seen the AG letter yet, but I've been told by actually a few people that the town of Charlton just passed recently a cap on the number of solar facilities. It's worth noting that town of Charlton, outside of Spencer, Charlton's been probably host to about as many solar facilities as you'll see anywhere else. And I actually, just as I'm speaking about this, I see that I have a letter from the Attorney General for the town of Oxford just this spring approving a cap on the number of facilities in Oxford. They're doing it at 15. So it's, obviously it's something you need some time to look at, Todd, but it just from what I'm pulling off the top of my head and just putting in front of my right here, it's
sure.
It appears to be a route we can take, and I guess that's the thing. The thing I'm trying to walk away with tonight is what is the board's demeanor on this? What are you guys' thoughts?
John, first of all, we just read that letter, the AG letter. Pretty much they approved the cap, but they said you really can't stop solar farm based on MGL, whatever it was.
Well, and that's it, in so many words, kind of, and that's been the same. That's the classic go-to reference that we've heard probably 100 times cited by any one of the attorneys that comes in front of us. That Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 3, it's something that was written. It's not a recent law. It was written before, solar facilities that the way you currently see them written before this phase came around, so to speak. And it's I would defer to town council as their, I guess, ultimately what it means and how it'll be interpreted, but it's kind of a nobody's touched it yet. Nobody's gone to that level. Nobody's fought it to that degree. So it's, until it is, it's kind of like a game of chicken, for the lack of a better way of putting it.
Now, was the AG's letter, approval letter, based on a bunch of bylaw changes, and the cap was part of it? So they were basically approving all the bylaw changes, and then mentioned that the cap probably wouldn't stand because of the MGL? Or was it?
I'll have to send them out. You'll have to read it. They do specifically call out the part it would referencing a cap on the number of facilities, and they do specifically approve that language. Then they continue on to say, however, just keep in mind, FYI, MGL says this, and we don't have any examples of this being taken to the Massachusetts Supreme Court and being decided, but we suggest you talk to your lawyer and keep this in mind, kind of thing.
Okay, so the AG's review is specifically for caps, not for a total overview or upgrade of the bylaws.
Right. For this particular one I'm looking at, for this was North Brookfield. They actually it appears that their warrant article was broken, or the town meeting warrant. Sorry, the town meeting warrant was broken up into a few separate articles regarding amendments to their bylaw in reference to solar facilities. So it's like says the Article 27 amends a section of their solar bylaw regarding monitoring and maintenance, and it covers herbicides and chemicals. It actually says that, that they may not, that it has to be applied consistent with the Pesticide Control Act, which is apparently some other kind of legal, some kind of other law that's in effect. And then further down, it specifically references Article 29. And Article 29 is an amendment to the applicability of the solar energy bylaw at North Brookfield, specifically a total number of facilities. So it's, this particular letter in the circumstance, they are speaking directly to the cap. And they're saying essentially, where you approve it, but just be in mind that this may ultimately come subject to a court decision at some point in time that could alter how this is applied.
Okay.
And so I guess my concern here, if you will, is I don't want the conversation to be, hey, let's decide on a cap, let's push that forward, and let's wipe our hands and be done with it. Because if the cap at some point doesn't, doesn't stay effective, if it ends up getting shot down, then, there's going to be an open door, so to speak. And if we don't further address all the other elements of the bylaw, then we're not going to be in a good position. But I feel that currently it's if it's the will of the board that we can take into account or think about adding in a cap on the number of facilities if that's what we feel appropriate, and that'll be in conjunction with all of our, I guess, other further technical, changes to the bylaw.
I guess my take on that is that these solar farms obviously are worth doing, especially the larger ones. And if someone comes along, wants to do a solar farm and we're at a cap, they're going to spend the money to fight it, and we're going to have to deal with it at that time.
And yeah, that's pretty much the nuts and bolts of my concern is that if there will probably eventually come to a point, depending upon subsidies, where it very, very well would be financially worthwhile for somebody to take a bylaw like this to court and fight it and possibly win. And that's that speaks directly to what I was saying, is where we can throw this in there as as a first layer of a first restriction, if you will. And I would, to be rigorous, we can't let that prevent us from still establishing the bylaw the way we feel appropriate. That we don't want to be left in a position where the cap can get shot down and then we don't have any good bylaw in place behind it.
Yep. So I think we still got to do the bylaw changes, because we're going to have other facilities before we get to any cap reset. So we definitely got to, update our bylaws.
Yeah. Yep. And actually, the thing I'd note there is, I believe, and I'm not sure on this, but I believe that the cap that was just voted on in Charlton, that it was amended to reflect the actual number of facilities they have currently, and that it would effectively limit any further facilities. So that's just, I guess, something just to keep in mind as an FYI. But even if that were the case, again, I'd still say we need to, go through and establish a bylaw and go through the same procedure, and just so we don't get caught in a bad spot.
To the chair.
Yep.
I would agree with that. While we're under the hood, I would definitely implement both, especially if there is precedented measures that these have been accepted before. As the adage says, go to the well once rather than twice.
I don't think I'm gonna. I see merit in evaluating it, and I'm still. It's something that I'm ultimately a little undecided upon myself. But I think it's something easier we can throw in there, and if that's the desire of the board and ultimately the town, if they vote in favor at town meeting, then that'll speak to the will of the town, and it's an option that we can provide. I guess so. I'll take the same approach I did earlier. Do we have any board members that are definitively in opposition to putting a cap on the number of facilities?
I'm not in opposition to it, but it'll be difficult to establish exactly what it should be, I think.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Jeff. It's I'm not opposed to it outright. It's there's a lot. I think it's easy to pick a number, but it's also not so easy to, I guess, come up with a justification and to pick a number and to justify it with something that the majority of people are going to agree with, I guess. I could argue it. I could argue it a bunch of different ways. But I if it's something that will establish ultimately what the town feels to be an appropriate goal, and the manner in which the town develops, then I think it's something that we have on the table and we're able to use.
Is that information that we can also look at from other towns and to see what other towns have done this?
Yeah, that would absolutely, that'd be part of the effort put forth, is to ascertain how broad of a scale that other towns may be instituting this. Is that not the answer for you, Todd? But is that fair?
Yeah, that's something I can start tackling, and if it gets to be a larger issue, I'll seek help.
And it's, again, this is something that CMRPC may already have a pretty good pulse on.
Exactly. This, like I said, these concerns are not unique to Spencer, so it wouldn't surprise me if there is probably a standing document or even a living document going on just to keep a pulse on solar bylaw development in our little central niche of Mass.
It's any other thoughts, Paul?
No, that's good.
Yeah. So, Maria, anything that you care to share?
No.
All right. It's so, I mean, again, it doesn't sound as if anyone's opposed to the idea, so we can keep that on the table and have that, absolutely identified as something we'd like to see, the feasibility of which we'd like to see addressed with CMRPC's review. The only remaining thing for the basics, if you will, that I'd just like to hit on is the size in general, but I'm personally I'm more referring to the size of wooded area that would be forested area that would be cleared to accommodate these facilities. As I from the get-go, I've and it was even the original intent with our current bylaw, the way it's worded, where that we only want 50% of the forested area of a lot cleared, and it's 50% of a lot of acres is still a lot of acres. It's what we're seeing at the end of the day. And you know, it's my personal take that it's a hard sell for me to say that, you know, solar energy is clean energy when you're cutting down 50 acres of forest to put it in. That's counterintuitive from my point of view. And it's solar energy and solar facilities in this regard. We have existing land uses that lend themselves to be perfect candidates for solar facilities. You know, open field, previously farmed land. You know, area that doesn't require virtually any area that isn't completely forested. It lends itself to having a solar facility on it. And it makes more sense than, like I said, just taking a forested section of land somewhere in the town and cutting down acreage to put up solar panels. I'll keep that short and sweet, and I'll defer to the board. What are you guys' thoughts?
My thoughts are we got same issue we had before. Someone clears their land 5 years ago that was all forest, and now they're going to submit a plan for a solar farm. They're basically circumventing our bylaw. And I think we've tried to address that, but I don't think it's an easy thing to do.
I mean, technically, it doesn't have to be 5 years before. It doesn't have to be 5 days before. It could be the day before they come into the site plan. Really.
Yep.
And go ahead, John.
It's that and that's where it's a difficult situation. Simply put, yeah. And it's the thing that we kind of, you know, there is a Conservation Commission regulation where it's, I believe they're not supposed to issue a notice of intent on a project that's been on a project that's situated on chapter whichever the forestry tax exemption is. It's 61A maybe. So
yeah.
I forget.
61A.
Okay, so 61A. So it's they have a regulation saying that they're not supposed to issue any notice of intent or, you know, permit a project that's been on land that has any point in the past 5 years been categorized under Chapter 61A. So that eliminates. Basically, they can't go out and say they have a forestry exemption and log the lot, and then come in afterwards and say, "Well, it's all open for solar, and I didn't have to clear anything." So we kind of have an avenue there, you know, and
yes,
yep.
I think yes and no, but I could go forest, not called forest 61A, just go and cut a bunch of trees down for the lumber and not claim the tax exempt 61A, and that doesn't apply.
That's kind of the next point I was going to get to is technically something like that. It's the extent to which you're doing it to could trigger that you would require a stormwater permit to do it. So if that's the case, then, you know, you either have, you know, documentation of, hey, they're coming in to request a stormwater permit to clear a bunch of land, and you can tell them at that point, hey, you're not going to be eligible to develop this as a solar facility or XYZ in the next X amount of years, or or they don't come and get a stormwater permit, and then you go in and check it out, and well, hey, you never properly pulled a permit to clear the land, and that gives us an avenue to say, well, it's not properly eligible for you to say that it's cleared.
Yeah. I guess it also goes down to whatever percentage we set. Like right now, it's 50% of the lot. If they go and clear a bunch of stuff and they've only cleared 30%, then it's a moot point.
Yeah, and I think we could even we very well may be able to take some of the gray area out of it and put something explicit in our bylaw saying that a solar facility will not be permitted on land that was at any point in the last 20 years considered forested.
Yep.
It's that have to be something evaluated to see if we could legally propose something like that in the bylaw. But if that's the case, that they can address it right there, and that's something we can use Google Maps and Google Earth to our advantage in that regard.
Yep. I think if you go back 100 years, a lot of these forested areas weren't forested; they were farmed or just clear land. And as they no longer made it profitable to use them as farms, trees started growing and multiplying. But you don't see too many trees around here more than 100 years old or 120 years old.
Bingo. As case in point, the property I live on, Donnelly Crossroad, this was all farmland. Back probably early 1900s, I believe. I think it predated World War II, and even the First World War. But somewhere like before 1950, after 1900, somewhere in that time frame. And then it was no longer farmland, and then it was allowed to, it was basically just not tended, and then a lot of the wooded area you see up here now, if you go and you pick a tree anywhere out back and you cut it down, it's no more than 50 to 75 years old.
Right. So cutting down 50% of a lot for a solar farm, just putting it back to where it was 80 years ago.
You could make that argument.
So I guess, we have a lot of forest areas, but it's not the original way it was originally. I don't know. I'm looking at the devil's advocate, I guess. Someone could argue, hey, I just put it back the way it was 50 years ago.
Yeah, no, right. And it's a fair point. And that, that I guess that emphasizes the importance of evaluating how exactly we word it. Just so that we don't get something like that pulled over our head. And I guess first of all is coming to a consensus on what our intent is. Is it do we really want to compare it to what it quote unquote originally was when the town was first incorporated in whatever year that may be, or do we want to just kind of we need to base it upon whatever we can easily justify or argue or hold. It's maybe, like I said, if you just base it upon the last 20 years or some, whatever it was 20 years ago, if it was forested, and that's what it's based upon. I don't know. That's what I'm saying. It's just I guess what are the well, I guess let's put it this way: do any of the board members have any concern with I guess the overall issue I raised of a cutting of forested land for installation of these facilities? I mean, are we all in agreement that that's something that we should really try to avoid? Or does
it is something to try to avoid. It's just so hard to quantify how to sort of sum it up.
That's fair. I mean, I guess does anyone feel that the current or I guess previous condition of the property in terms of how forested it is, does anyone feel that shouldn't be taken into account? I mean, granted, it's a difficult thing to quantify, and but I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna punt this one. I guess it's just a matter. I think that again, and ultimately, the whole intent of this is to try to align with the overall town's goal to retain a less developed what's the word I'm looking for? Character.
Bucolic aesthetic.
Yeah. Yep. So it's to that end, it's this is really the only use that has surfaced to where it's readily resulting in acreages of forested area being cleared and repurposed on a repeated basis. And it's I feel it's appropriate to I guess keep that in consideration as we go forward. It's like in regards to our current bylaw where we have the restriction of 50%. Do we want to cut it down to 25%?
I guess just like we've done the other bylaw, let's check what other towns have done. What are we more restrictive than other towns? Are we in line? I mean, I'm not sure how many towns have such a restriction that we have.
I will say it from I believe discussions in the past that we are a little unique in the regard with this particular requirement, and I want to say we're on the more restrictive side.
I haven't found anything more restrictive in terms of deforestation.
Yep. And so it's I'll never be the shy one to not set the first example if need be.
Mr. Chairman, citizen speak?
Yeah, I can do citizen. Give us a little bit, please, just to finish the board discussion, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
So it's, you know, again, it is worth noting, you know, our I guess comparison to how it's handled in other areas, but it's, you know, if the true intent is to preserve rural character and forested area and to or to, you know, promote other uses which have a lesser impact on forested land, then you know, I think a further restriction on the clearing of forested land is warranted. You know, I'll kick it to you guys. What do you think?
I think, you know, trying to keep the rural characteristic, so to speak, is something obviously you see as you drive down the road. If we set our setbacks such that that forested area has to be maintained at the 100 foot or 200, whatever footage we come up with, so when you're driving down the road, you see forest, you don't see the solar farm 200 feet inland because it's, you know, a forested area has basically provided a good buffer. Maybe we do something like that to help keep the forested look or character and not the solar farm character.
And you hit the nail on the head. That's, you know, that was one of my drives to you know, bringing up the issue of setbacks from the get-go, is that I think they can kind of be used as a broadsword, so to speak, to take the curse off a lot of these issues. And you know, you're gonna still, with a larger setback, there's a substantial likelihood that you're gonna preserve rural character to a significant degree. But you know, if you have somebody that chooses to develop their land in this manner, that they can still do so without you know, having what other people perceive to be a very detrimental impact on the area.
And I think our 50%, like we've already discussed, is pretty restrictive already compared to other towns. I think we could live with that along with the proper setbacks so that, you know, they're still cutting down some trees, but again, it's no different than it was 100 years ago, but we are still maintaining the rural character when you drive down the road, so on and so forth. It's not going to help with that solar farm that's up a hill or down the valley you can see because of the angles, but I think it would help.
Right. Yep. So let's all right, let's how about we say it like this, that we just, it may not necessarily require a substantial modification or further specific language to the clearing of forested land, but it's something that, you know, we should keep in the back of our minds when we evaluate some of the particular changes we do make, that I guess we just say to ourselves, our overall goal here is to have these executed in a manner that it preserves, you know, character and forested area and so forth and so on. Is that fair?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Yep, good. Sounds good.
Same here.
All right. Thank you, guys. Matt, I'm assuming you wanted to comment on that. Is there something you'd like to share?
Yes, thank you for allowing me to speak. I just want to make a couple comments in regards to the conversation you were having, and then I just want to piggyback on Todd's narrative, if I could, to kind of summarize. First of all, obviously, siting is very important. Character of our town is very important with the implementation of these developments. As far as you were speaking before about 40A Section 3 and the argument we've heard over and over from solar developers, as far as you can't stop them, we're not talking about stopping them, and we should just eliminate that thought and that language. It's about being able to control your own town and having the courage to control what goes on in your own town, not what solar developers tell you. I'd like you to keep in mind that at 50 feet, that's no distance at all. The meeting room where you guys normally have your meetings is about 30 feet wide. So that gives you 50 feet isn't a lot if they're parking one of these in your backyard. So you can vision this from Route 9 Main Street on the western side of the town hall, at the crosswalk on Main Street up until the building with the bell tower in it is about 225 feet. So that's not a very big distance if someone's parking one of these in your backyard. That being said, I'd just like to give a little refresher. As a reminder, the 7 members of the Solar Bylaw Advisory Committee spent a year's time doing extensive investigation and research into all aspects of solar development. Of most concern was the large-scale commercial development due to the scale of possible impacts upon our town. Committee members traveled to neighboring towns and throughout the state, attending meetings, engaging with other administrations and representatives, also including local affected citizens, to get input, opinions, and gather facts and learn the associated issues surrounding large-scale commercial solar facilities. Members also toured a battery-operated facility in Sterling, Mass., as well as visiting a manufacturing plant of one of the major components of solar facilities, the inverters. Over the course of the year, many hours were spent in spirited discussions among all members, evaluating the pros and cons of large-scale solar development, specifically the risks versus the benefits. One of the most important topics of concern was the overall protection of all of Spencer's residents, both monetarily and environmentally, as well as the possible long-term effects of this form of development in a town of our size. The Solar Bylaw Advisory Committee presented the town's representatives with a very thought out report of findings. The Solar Bylaw Advisory Committee's justifications and recommendations contained in the report are clear and should be implemented in our bylaws. Most other surrounding town bylaws are comparatively similar in nature and reflect a boilerplate approach within the documentation. Our town, Spencer's bylaw priority should be to focus on our specifics and our individual protections and concerns, as each town is unique. Now, in my own opinion, the town needs to formulate a specific plan that includes a cap number on the large-scale commercial developments allowed in a town of our size. I believe we have enough already. That's my own personal opinion. I think you should support, as recommended by the committee, absolutely not allowing batteries due to the dangers and the many risk factors previously brought forward from the committee and discussed. And we should only take cash bonds paid up front to protect the town that include a buffer and escalators. Finally, consider what just occurred in Texas and the Midwest with renewable energies, lack of history in solar and wind. It is the unknown, the unforeseen, the unexpected, the unprepared that can absolutely destroy a small town like ours. Please give careful consideration and thought to the committee's report and make the protection of our town the highest priority in the final approval of any bylaws that get implemented. And as far as a cap and justification, I think it's pretty easy. Our town is 21,000 acres with a population of 11,000, 5,700 households, and we have 17, 18, who knows now, commercial solar farms. That's more than enough, and it's more than fair. So I think there. Thank you for your time.
All right. Thank you, Matt. And as usual, you raise legitimate points, and it's they're all something that we need to consider. So thank you.
Thanks for listening.
So that said, unless anyone has any objection, we can push through these remaining items. Next one being the peer review status discussion. So I guess real quickly, it's I had put this on just to keep the issue fresh, if you will, from our last meeting where there was some back and forth on how peer review was being handled, and I did forward an email to the board just before the meeting, where the town administrator had agreed to allowing that particular project to proceed with LEI. I think that was kind of that's substantially resolves the issue for the time being, I believe. Was there anything that you wanted to weigh in on regarding that, Todd?
Not especially. I do recall seeing an RFQ placed for BSC to serve as the peer reviewing authority for the town, ideally to serve as one umbrella for both Concom and Planning Board. It's my understanding that will be the procedure going forward. But for this particular kind of atypical case, the town administrator did authorize the use of LEI for this project.
Okay. So I guess did any of the board members wish to comment on this at all? I'm gonna.
What project are we talking about? No, I had which project are we talking about?
Ash Street in particular, I believe.
Okay. All right.
It was one of the projects where they started and peer review was being done by Leonard Engineering, LEI, and then halfway through was when last year the town had decided to move forward with BSC as a peer review, and it was kind of up in the air, I guess, how some of these existing projects were going to be handled, and I just, especially in the circuit.
Wasn't BSC kind of falling behind on those reviews? They weren't really producing reviews in a timely manner on this one?
Well, there appears to have been a disconnect, I guess is the best way to say it. And I don't have we don't have all the emails that were exchanged and every particular phone call and everything that was said and so forth and so on. So it didn't end up being an efficient process, and it just seemed to make more sense to proceed with who was originally being used, I guess is the way I guess the best summary, if you will.
I agree.
All right.
I think I suggested that, didn't I?
You very well could have. And I so it made sense then. It still makes sense. So anyway, I just said put this on the agenda just partly for my own sake, so I wouldn't forget it, and just wanted to make sure it's kept moving. So it appears it has. So we can leave it at that unless anybody else would like to make a comment. Hearing no one. Next item is discussion potential zoning bylaw amendments for annual town meeting. And this is again something I just kind of threw on here as a reminder for myself as much as it was for everyone else. And I didn't know if there was any desire for any of the board members to address any specific, I guess, small or easy or kind of typos or any issues like that with the bylaw that you may recall that we've dealt with in recent times. If that's something that we want to tackle and that's something we have time to tackle, there's that. And also I was kicking around the idea of evaluating an extension to the moratorium. Because, and again, my thought process there is, think about our current circumstance is, town meeting passed the moratorium and sometime in November, I forget. Excuse me. Sometime in November, and this is now March 2nd, and I guess it's not set in stone, so to speak. And what I fear is if the current moratorium is set to expire at a year, so sometime in November, and if we vote at town meeting, the new bylaw changes in at, similar time, are we going to be exposing ourselves to a interim few month period where the moratorium may have lapsed, but maybe our new bylaws haven't been, vetted or approved, and we may not be able to implement them. I guess so that was the thought process. This is more just kind of a quick discussion for tonight and not necessarily, coming up with an answer, but this is something you care to weigh in on, Todd?
No, I think that's about right, as in the potentiality of the different lines of action. However, I do think we should, if we're going to be going that route, we need to keep in mind that the extension of the bylaw also has to be approved. The extension of the moratorium has to be approved by the AG's office as well anyway. So we should not take that as a given or take that as a guarantee. So we should keep that in mind as we move forward.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that was the purpose of just putting this on the agenda to get it out in everybody's head, and I'm just trying to think of the bigger picture, and I don't want us to end up in a poor position. So if I can,
I'm completely in favor of having a warrant article in November that extends the moratorium. I'm completely in favor of that. I think we just need to wait for the current moratorium to be approved, though, before we really have any further discussion.
Well, and so that's just specifically to that point. It's, if we wait till November to put it on again as an extension, the existing one was going to run out before we get an answer back on the extension. Do you see what I'm saying?
And the problem is the lag time with waiting for the approval.
Mm.
Is it too late
Right.
to do this for
And
the Maytown meeting? Is it too late to do this? I'm just brainstorming. Is it too late for the Maytown meeting? I don't know.
Not too late yet. We're tight on time, but if the desire is there, it can still be done. I'll put it that way.
I mean, we're still going to have a long way to go. We're still going to have a long way to go with this revising the solar bylaw, after November, from what I see. Especially, you laid out sort of the low-hanging, more general stuff for November, and then much more details, controversial stuff kind of into next year anyway. So we're going to be extending the moratorium.
I think it's absolutely something that has to be looked at, and I guess my goal in just raising the issue tonight is, this may not even necessarily be something that the planning board spearheads. That I'm just bringing awareness to it, and if the select board feels it's appropriate to discuss the issue and to take this on themselves, they absolutely have that prerogative. But I guess I wanted to raise the flag and let my concerns be known, if you will, so that I guess at the end of the day that I can at least say I told you so, if nothing else. I mean, that's not that's not the overall goal, but it's put it out there, and if anyone else finds my concerns to be legitimate, then there can be action taken. So it's all the nuances of this entire process need to be appreciated, if you will. So that was it for that. The board members like to share their thoughts regarding that, and I think Jeff already noted his.
Well, I agree.
All right, Paul. Thank you. At least if I'm crazy, I'm not crazy by myself at this point.
True.
Won't be lonely.
Yeah. So there's no objections. I'll continue on. Town planner report. What do you got for us, Todd?
Yes, sir. Not to beat the horse too much to death, but based on the discussions that I've been witness to today, that's greatly helped inform me of other content to be bringing to CMRPC's attention. So that helps kind of filter down to me what are really the kind of pronounced issues that need to be addressed. And from there, that helps us target those specific issues better. So I would like to thank every member of the board for contributing their thoughts and weighing in on some of these desired revisions to the solar bylaw. From there, I've got my work cut out for me, and by extension, CMRPC has their work cut out for them as I convey to them what really needs to be addressed with the 11 hours we have remaining, at least until July. So until then, I'll be working diligently with CMRPC, with Trish Settles, and the rest of the team, and I'll convey updates as appropriate, and I'll update you all on the movements on this project as it goes along. If anyone has any questions, they can always give me an email or give me a call. I like talking, if you haven't noticed. So feel free to reach out, and I'll give you an update or a pulse on this project as it moves. Okay? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Todd. Let's see. Moving on, general board discussion, board liaison reports. Was there anything anyone would wish to share?
I have a question. Last meeting, we extended or continued, I should say, several items. Where some of those items we're waiting for answers on things, or something, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but I thought there was at least one or two items that someone had to research, or I don't know. I'm just thinking there was something that we're looking for answers on.
You are correct. Let me figure out which notepad I scribbled it down.
I guess I should start scribbling down stuff so I remember.
Was that the North Cross?
Then you forget where you put the note. That's what I always do.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's,
I end up finding where I wrote down the same damn thing in 6 different places at the end of the day. I know that. So one thing that jumps out was the circumstances of the A&R plan for the proposed CVS site.
Yes,
maybe that was it. We're trying to decide what comes first, the chicken or the egg on something.
Yeah, that was the crux of it. More or less was can we actually, because they're going to be buying all the lots individually and then filing a plan to combine them. So that's really kind of, so that there's kind of nothing preventing them from actually tearing the buildings down before they file the plan, then we can approve it, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And if there was any way of conditioning or doing that process in another manner, if you will. What else?
So our concern is they buy these, they have these individual lots they purchased, they tear down the buildings, and then they never combine it because something happened with the deal, and now we're stuck with 4 lots with nothing on them? Or is it,
It would be
I could address that.
It'd be possible. Yeah, go for it.
Sure. The primary concern that was expressed last meeting was that these lots are merged together. If we execute all the A&Rs as they were proposing, we execute all these A&Rs and consolidate all 4 of these lots. However, they, for whatever reason, either fail to raise the structure or if something falls through, that you have several primary uses on what is now one lot. And that's
okay. That was it. All right. I knew it was something like that. So we'd want them to remove the buildings before they show an AR plan with 4 buildings on one lot.
It was explored. The question was posited whether or not we could apply conditions formally. I've never heard of that being done. So I reached out to several members within my professional circle. They haven't either. They said that really is a question that should be elevated to town council. It should be a relatively quick question. It's a simple binary yes or no, with some wiggle room for a conditionality. But that's something that we were going to be attached to when we had Eichmann on the phone for an unrelated issue. We were going to tack that on and get that cleared up very quickly.
You think he needs a little heads up to do his research and not at the time of the meeting? Ask that question ahead of time?
Yes, this would be a conversation I have with him over the phone whilst I have him leftover time with him as we're talking about a separate, unrelated issue.
Okay. I think you should bring this one up first, then talk about your other issue.
I will consider that.
I think we need an answer on this because this is, kind of important. And we went back and forth the last meeting on this, and I see the concern. We don't like supposed to have one use or one building on a piece of property. Back in the 1800s, they used to put 4 buildings on a piece of land. I happen to have one of them down, in all the factory areas because they just put a bunch of houses up for people to live in to work at the factories. But they're all on one lot.
Exactly.
And
that's one of the reasons why zoning exists, and not to make light of it. I will certainly be addressing that concern to Eichmann, and he should be able to answer that with little research, because this is really a matter of precedent. I'm sure he must have heard something. It's such an atypical issue. If it were to have precedent, I'm sure it would be known.
All right, so it'll be a quick question to ask him right in the beginning of your conversation.
I will certainly do that. For that, you can be sure.
Okay. And then get back to us before the meeting so we know how to address the A&R.
Exactly. I will make sure to send out an email to the board informing them of the clarification of the issue.
Okay. I think that was the one I was trying to think of. I don't know if there was another issue on the solar farms that we're looking for answers or not. Other than having E&I review Ash Street.
Yeah. I think those were the 2 biggies.
All right.
So the only other thing I'll mention real quick is, as far as board liaison, the capital committee had their initial 2 meetings, and we'll be having our first meeting and presentations next a week from today, I believe. Anyone else have anything else would like to share?